Greetings! It's great to be back in the studio after so long. I'll be your host for tonight because Keith is actually one of my 3 guests for the evening. My other 2 guests are Keith's brother Carl and their old friend Donna Neufeld. All 3 of my guests are former members of the 1970s paranormal group called P.I.R.O, which stands for Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization out of Rhode Island College. In 1973, there was no internet. I think we all agree with that. Because of that, Keith put an ad in a local paper advertising this group's services. 3 weeks later, their group was contacted by a family living in Harrisville, Rhode Island. After a very intense initial investigation, it was decided that a consultation with seasoned investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren would be required. This consultation and what happened next is the subject of a movie by New Line Cinema, in theaters probably by the time you watch this, called The Conjuring. And it's directed by James Wan, who also directed the movies Saw and Insidious. The movie is told from the perspective and personal recollections of Lorraine Warren. Though Keith writes a lot about his original days of investigations in his Paranormal Realities book series, it's always good to also get the histories out there directly from the folks who were there. And it's good to have you here, Donna. You were the chairperson of P.I.R.O, and can you tell us briefly a little bit about what that was like and the organization?
Okay, well, P.I.R.O came to be when I found other people who had similar interests to me in the paranormal, and we found quite a diverse group right at Rhode Island College, and we actually labored very diligently to get it recognized by the college as an official organization, which they finally did. And we had numerous investigations, not only ghostly things, but also UFOs, witchcraft, you know, the whole gamut. We even had a druid in our group.
Oh, that's interesting. What was his function? Or do you remember?
He was just a member, and whenever we went into the woods, he was the person to go to.
He did his thing. Okay.
Tree person.
Yes.
And can anyone tell me how you first became involved with this particular case, the Perron case on which The Conjuring is based?
I met Donna. So, you know, one thing led to another after that.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, Sandra, I had put an ad in a local paper. I designed it myself, and I assumed it would
so
just...
quaint.
Right? Yeah, just a little ad. I mean, like you said, it was before the internet, so I designed this little ad, put it in the paper, that we do investigations of things that are not readily explained, free of charge. And 3 weeks later, Donna was contacted by Carolyn Perron from Harrisville, Rhode Island, and she was living in a severely haunted 18th century farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, known as the Arnold Estate. And of course, next we interviewed Carolyn. You remember that, Donna?
Yes.
And Carl, you remember that?
I can remember.
And what are some of the things she told us?
Well, one of the very first things that she came to us with to get us interested enough to actually investigate was she was relating some of the incidents that had happened at the house. And the first one I remember her saying was about how she had gone in to take a bath, and she had, it was an old farmhouse, so there was really not a lot of heat in the house. And she had this walk-in closet off the bathroom, between the bathroom and the bedroom. And she used to call it the warm room. So she decided she'd dry off in there, and as she was drying off, this was in broad daylight, a hanger that had been empty on the rack came off, was suspended in midair, and then started hitting her in the head. That was the first thing she said that happened. Then there was another incident where she was cutting open an orange at breakfast, and the orange bled, actual blood, down onto her foot as she was cutting it for the kids. So those were the two of the first things that led us to go into the investigation.
So those are pretty intense occurrences. We've all been investigating for many years now, and you don't experience those things at that often at different locations. Carl, what specifically did you experience there?
On our first visitation, I remember it well, when we pulled up to the driveway right away, we were a little apprehensive anyway, knowing of the activity that had been reported. But I think the hair on our necks and arms stood up straight when we drove up and got out of our vehicles, because it was heavy there. There was something electric but heavy and oppressive we just sensed. And I had gone upstairs after interviewing and assisting with the interviews, and well, one of the bedrooms, remember, that was ice cold even in August. This was August 1973. A window was sealed shut, and it wasn't from the paint because it used to open, it just would not open. And I went upstairs to where the children's bedrooms were, and I saw this black smoky, I don't even know if I can call it a form, but this blackness.
A mist.
Yep, a mist rolled down the hallway towards me. And when it came to me, I think I was enveloped by it. It just felt very tingly, and I didn't feel any real emotion associated with it. I was just in this black cloud. My first thought was that there was a fire in the house, but something was odd about it. I didn't smell smoke or soot, and then it just dissipated. It went away. But I distinctly remember that black shadowy mass coming down the hallway like smoke, like mist, and suddenly I was inside of it.
Not your typical shadow person experience.
No,
Doesn't
this
sound
didn't have like the shadowy person form. This was just black and coming toward me. It filled up the hallway where I was.
What about you, Keith? What were some of your particular experiences there?
Well,
Originally.
Exactly what they were describing, the sense of dread that something really didn't want you there. That's what you felt, and it was tangible. It was actually almost like a physical sensation, as if something was drawing energy out of you, almost like an electrical impulse, and you wanted to get away. I mean, you wanted to be there because that's why we were there, to help the family, but you didn't want to be there because you felt so unwelcome there. And they took us out to a barn where an elderly woman had supposedly hanged herself off one of the rafters, and you really felt it out there too. And of course, the children took to me, and they grabbed my wrist and gave me a tour of the property. Then later on, while Carl and Donna were downstairs interviewing the family, I was upstairs with the children, and you could feel it just building and building. As Carl said, the windows were stuck, either open or closed. Now, the windows in this room were open, and you could not close them for anything. But I happened to be speaking with them about their fears. They were confiding their fears to me and how terrified they were. And of course, we talked about the fact that they were Catholic, that they did attend worship service, and I advised them, well, try praying, try calling upon Jesus. As soon as I said that name, the window that wouldn't close suddenly slammed with tremendous force.
That's significant.
Enough to shake the room in that split second. And you could just cut the air with a knife. It was like somebody turned an electric switch on. Almost like an electric current underwater is the only way I can describe it. One of the girls was slapped, and she was slapped on the left side of her head. She went almost reeling off the bed, screaming, and they were terrified. I called upon the name of Jesus 2 more times, and it stopped. I mean, there was like things moving, there was like pandemonium going on in the room, but it all happened so fast. And after I'd called upon the name of Jesus 3 times altogether, it just stopped. It didn't leave the house, but it left the room automatically. So I came downstairs with the children, and they're hugging and kissing me and everything like that. Oh, we felt safe up there, you know, and the mother's looking, you actually felt safe upstairs. And so that was my initial experiences there.
Would you call that your first attempt at religious provocation, or
Yes.
Your accidental?
Yes, it was my first accidental. I realized it was provoking. I didn't realize it would have that much of an effect. I mean, you know, we had investigated, Carl and I had investigated our own home that had some activity, and we'd gone on cases with P.I.R.O, but to have that reaction really told me something. So I realized this family did need help.
In that vein, Did any of you feel threatened by what was there?
I think we were too inexperienced to actually feel threatened. We felt the tenseness. You got to remember, we were all between the ages of like 18 and 22. There weren't any of these shows out. We didn't have all the equipment that's available now, like the EVP monitors, and we were just really flying by the seat of our pants, just trying to figure out what we were doing as we went along. And it was pretty scary once we realized just how real this was.
Especially being your first case.
Yeah, first real case.
First
yes.
residential case. Exactly.
Client case. Did you fear for the family's safety?
I
Did you feel they were in danger?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
we all agree that.
And as time went on, as we learned more and more about it, and right when we were bringing the Warrens in, it got worse, where Carolyn was being affected, the mother of the house.
She seemed to be targeted mainly. She was the main victim of the force in that house, the negative force.
You recall we hadn't been there for a couple of weeks, and when we went back, the change in them, the physical change.
Yeah, the physical change in her especially was amazing.
Well, you mentioned the Warrens. Can you tell me how specifically that they became involved with the case?
Donna?
That would be me. One night, Carolyn Perron called me up frantic. I'd just gotten home from Rhode Island College, and she had told me that she was never going to leave this house, no matter what happened. She was from an old Georgia plantation family, and nothing was going to scare her. She told me she had actually seen a man's head blown off in a cotton field, and she said, nothing is going to scare me out of this house. And she called me that night, and she said, Donna, after the experience I had last night, I have to get out. And she proceeded to tell me about this incident that happened. Do you want me to go into that?
Absolutely.
Well, she and her husband were both there, and he and she had gone to bed early. She said something exploded on her dresser in the middle of the night, and she didn't know what it was, and it woke her up naturally. And she started to try to wake up her husband, Roger, and he was in what we would call a psychic sleep. It wasn't meant for him to experience. So no matter what she did, she could not wake him up. And as her eyes became accustomed to the light in the bedroom, she noticed there was a figure at the foot of her bed. And she said the figure was dressed in colonial costume, had like an apron on and a hat, but she started to notice that the head was cocked off to the side. And as it started moving around the bed, and she became more and more aware of the figure, it was chanting. And the chant, she said all she could remember were the final 4 lines were, I'll drive you mad with fiery brooms, I'll drive you mad with death and gloom, but it'll be too late for you because you'll be dead. And at that point, she passed out.
I might pass out too.
And she was so frantic. I said, Carolyn, I'm hanging up with you right now. Try to remain calm. Stay around the family. Have people in the house. Don't be alone. I said, as soon as I hang up the phone with you, I'm calling Ed and Lorraine Warren. And that's how we got the Warrens in. I think they came 2 days later.
Okay. Alternately, how did P.I.R.O's involvement with the Perron case come to a close?
Because Ed and Lorraine Warren came in and they basically said, okay, we're taking over. They didn't want us there. They said we shouldn't be here after dark, which we've been there plenty of times after dark.
And certainly the family was still there after dark.
She, Lorraine said to Carolyn, because she was undergoing such significant personal physical attack, it was actually draining the energy from her, the entity. And she told Carolyn, do not sleep in your bedroom, sleep out in the sun porch, and have someone like a neighbor or someone watch you all night long while you sleep to protect you in case there's anything happening. And that's what she did as far as I know.
Carolyn told me afterwards that they were advised by Ed and Lorraine that Ed and Lorraine could not help them if they had contact with any other paranormal groups, that they had to be exclusively the ones intervening in their situation. Otherwise, they couldn't do any good. So that eclipsed P.I.R.O.
Yeah, and we did look at them as they were the experts in the field, and they
And
said,
you guys were
okay.
so young at
we
the
were only
time.
college and high school
Novices.
kids. And, you know, like I say, we were together because we had an interest in this field, and everyone kind of looked at us like we were a little loony, which now it's, you know, the in thing. Everybody wants to
Right.
get into the paranormal.
Not
Right.
so popular back then.
No.
No. But that was before I started carrying holy water and blessed oil with me. But I did take the kids' sidewalk chalk and start drawing crosses around the bedroom and over the doorpost and everything.
Yeah, so you tried to perform an intervention,
Yes.
which is what we do as a matter of course now.
Exactly.
Yeah, we all started somewhere. Since this was your original case, were any of you ever contacted by the producers of The Conjuring to have your input?
No.
No, I never received that call nor email. I don't remember ever hearing from them.
No, I was never contacted by the producers. I am in close touch with the family, especially, of course, as you know, my dear friend Andrea, who's been on this show, and Roger.
Andrea.
Hi, Andrea. You know, and
Roger.
Yep, and we love you. And of course, you know, she was a wonderful guest, and she's written her book, House of Darkness, House of Light, which is the complete story in 3 volumes. So if you want to know the movie is not based on her book. It's based on Lorraine's recollections. But if you want to know the complete story from before that family moved in, right up till after they moved out, and what happened with the successive generations of people who have lived there, that's the books to turn to.
Or the short story in your book?
Yes,
Book 1 of Paranormal
the short
Realities.
story of Haunting in Harrisville in Paranormal Realities.
Well, I know you guys weren't contacted, but do you know if any of you were actually portrayed in the movie?
I'm rather hoping not. From some things I've heard how I might be portrayed, I don't know. We'll know after you see the movie, I guess. I don't know if I dare to go.
Donna, do you think you're
I
portrayed?
have a feeling we are left out totally.
That's more likely.
I was at the New York Comic-Con in October where they actually had a 10 or 15-minute screening of the movie, and I got to speak to the stars and in particularly to James Wan, the director. And when I said what I had to say to him, he said, well, I guess I should have talked to you before I made the movie. And I said, yeah, you should have. But no contact was made. I attempted to give him my business card. A woman from New Line Cinema grabbed it out of his hand and never heard from him, ever.
Well, I did read the cast list, and it does say one of the cast list a college student. So maybe that one of us is the college student. I don't know.
College
There you
student.
go.
It just says in the cast list for The Conjuring, you know, it says who plays who, but there's one, it's not named, but it just says college student. So maybe that represents us.
Maybe. I did say to him that I was hoping that at the very least our group would get recognition in the credits of the movie, but he never contacted me, so he doesn't even know the name of the group.
Well, who knows?
Well,
Maybe-
Mr. Wan, you're going to have to be on our show. What can I say?
Yeah.
We'll be contacting you.
Of course,
We're easy to find.
To introduce the group P.I.R.O. or any group representing a college-based parapsychological investigation outfit organization, it would violate the storyline. I think they would have to change too much
Yes.
You know,
to have that. They'd
can't
have
expect the story exactly as it happened. I mean, you want a 3-week movie, but you know, it's things are changed, and but some things remain the same. But I do know, unfortunately, Lorraine, because of her busy schedule, and God bless her, all she's doing. She could not be with us tonight, but I know she did appreciate our intervention and us consulting her and her late husband. One of my regrets about this is that, unfortunately, Ed is no longer around, could not be around to see this movie made, which I know was...
Actually, Lorraine would say he's here with her now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yep, she would. But I do have a brief recording of Lorraine from one of her lectures. Well, she does mention us and how she did appreciate us, and see if I can get it to play over here since it's a handheld tape recorder. But
anyway, we were involved in that case back in the 70s. Donna was a student here, and Carl was a student here at that time. They hosted us to go to that house. The Bewitched Farmhouse was a case that literally intrigued us. The research into that case, and it's a very historic home, but talk about a house affecting people. Caroline Perron, the woman that lived there with her husband and her children, literally turned into someone who had lived there in the past. The house had a bizarre effect on people, but also bizarre things happened. There were numerous tragedies that surrounded that. Sometime when I'm back on campus again, I will use that case, bring the visuals of that case, and use that case.
so that's Lorraine joining us in spirit, and you know, she's a very, very busy lady these days. But you know, again, the history of that house. I mean, there was, of course, Bathsheba Sherman was accused of killing an infant, and she was not only acquitted, they just had an inquest. She was never brought up on charges because she was babysitting for an infant, laid the baby down. Baby died shortly afterwards, and they found a sewing needle embedded in the base of the baby's skull. She said that must have been an accident when I laid the baby down. And you know, it's terrible, terrible tragedies. Mr. John Arnold in 1883 committed suicide by drinking horse liniment. There was a lawyer named Jarvis Smith, froze to death in the little garret outside of the house on his way to the front door. I mean, it's just one thing after another. Edwin
A lot of
Arnold.
history.
Yeah.
That John Arnold was actually a 10-year-old boy, if I remember right. That
Well-
he crawled into the crawl space and drank the horse liniment.
Well, I heard that he was in his 70s at the time, but there were so many Arnolds. There were so many Arnolds in that house. I mean, it is the Arnold estate.
There
but,
was four brothers
yeah.
originally.
Oh, yes, yes. And actually, Bathsheba had a falling out with her brothers near the end of her life over a property dispute, you know. So she did go to court, but it wasn't over the killing of the infant. But she never lived down that reputation. She was accused of being in league with satanic forces for eternal beauty. Supposedly, pretty much the same thing happened to her that was happening to Carolyn Perron, and thank God we still have Carolyn with us.
Right.
But she was being victimized, and she was aging before her time and withered away. And some people say it was Mrs. John Arnold who hung herself in the barn out and back. Some people say it was Bathsheba Sherman, although she was, her death certificate says she died of paralysis and had to be carried out, stiff as a board. And
Do you remember when we went into the barn, you could actually see the rope marks
yeah.
in the wooden beam where supposedly
Still
she
there.
hung herself?
Still there.
It's still there.
Mm-hmm. One time, Carolyn said she was there, and a sickle came spiraling down at her. She just dodged it in time.
She's lucky she got out of there in
Yes.
one piece.
Well, do you have any closing words about this? And because the movie's coming out, and we'll all remember our first case fondly. And
Maybe we should reorganize P.I.R.O just for that one night and get as many P.I.R.O alum as we can, and many alumni from that group, and go see the movie together.
yes,
That would be wonderful.
Well, I know you guys were the original investigators there, and you were left out of the movie, but who knows, maybe some producer watching this episode of Ghosts R N.E.A.R might want to do a prequel to The Conjuring with the real deal here.
We've got plenty of material. We could fill up a movie. We're
Yes,
just scratching the
that's for
surface
sure.
of our experience.
I'll need
there,
a
of
wig
course.
because my hair was as long as yours at the time. So.
I just
can't
wanted
have
to bring out, when Carolyn first moved into the house, from what she had told me, she was the first owner of the house that was not in some way directly a descendant of the original Arnold family. That the owner she had bought it from, the widower, had been married to an Arnold descendant. And he used to leave the lights on in the house all night long.
Yes.
All over the house, up and down. And he used to live in this little tiny space in between a barn area and the house. It was like almost like a 2x4, just big enough to put a cot in. And that's where he lived, basically. And it's like he didn't live in the rest of the house.
So she was new blood. Thank you for bringing
If
that
I'm
up.
not mistaken, the residents of the house before the Perrons had a few experiences that you may recall.
Well, there were always people experiencing things, like the former resident, and then the people after, before the current residents. You know, they experienced one young man. He was a pastor's son. He saw
This is the one I'm thinking of.
elderly woman in his yard when he drove in, and she had her head cocked to the side, and you know, then he looked around, she wasn't there.
Coincidence? I think not.
Well, at this time, we're going to say our goodnights, and anybody who would like to come up and meet original members of Parapsychological Investigation and Research Organization, please feel free to come up and meet them in person. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We very, very much appreciate you joining us tonight. And we will do it all again very, very shortly.
Please, sir.
Thank you for joining us, Donna,
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Carl, and our friends. Come and join us.
Hello there.
And-
Hi.
Yes, the Chuckles Crew.
yes. So
see
good
you
to see
guys. I know
you.
you.
Yes. Our good friends, Charles and Lacey and Maureen.